social justice warriors and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, go see what it's like in another country. You think that you have it so bad? There was a guy that they called Home Depot because he was known for robbing Home Depot 7 times. But now,
LA 20 years ago and LA now are 2 different cities, right?
completely different.
When you live in the neighborhood, when you hear shots, when you see the drug dealers, when you know that they're killings. So right now, Chicago is a mess, right?
It's unbelievable that they've allowed it to get to this point. To me, that's just ludicrous. If you are attracted to a child, that's wrong, period, you're a pedophile. Done. Why is it that the inflation is gone and the costs, the salaries haven't stayed up with it? Persistence always prevails. What happened to the basics of what we were taught when we were kids of treat others how you want to be treated, go out of your way to help someone out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of a big problem now lately where I think I'm optimistic that we're going to fight through it, but, until people start realizing that they have to work together and strive to be better together, and it's not just America, it's all over the world.
Yeah, the divisiveness is crazy right now.
The only difference is in other places that I can speak from, like when there's a lot of the same people, the same nationality, they have a bit more of a unity, a bond. But that's also very ironic because America is known as the melting pot.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be one of the greatest nations.
Yeah.
Why aren't we acting like it?
That's a great question.
A loaded question.
I believe there's something in this because there are people who would like to see us divided.
Yeah.
And their plan is working.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ivan, do you say Ivan or Ivan? How do you call it in the US?
A lot of people would like to say Ivan, but I've been correcting him since I was born, and I'm going to continue because it's Ivan Djurovic or Ivan Djurovic, the American way.
Yeah.
But, there's something to be said about sticking to who you are and your name that you were given. And it's funny because, as you know, Ivan in other countries, especially in Russia or even Spain, is as common as John.
Yes.
But here, because of the spelling, they're like, well, I don't get it. And anytime I had a substitute teacher growing up, I'd always be like, oh, man, now I gotta, okay, no, it's not Ivan, it's Ivan.
Forget about it.
But, so it's something that I struggled with when I was younger and I thought about changing. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, no, this is what makes me who I am. You got to embrace that.
Because your mom gave it, or your dad,
yeah.
grandmother, grandfather gave your name.
It's also funny because, we don't, in our culture, we don't have middle names.
Yeah.
And so people are always like, well, how do you not have a middle name? Like, that's just...
But you got your father's name, right?
So, oddly enough, on one of my birth documents, my mom says, she's like, it's not supposed to be this way, but he somehow snuck in his father's name on one of my documents. I believe my social security card. It says Ivan Dmitry Djurovic. But yeah, no one in our family has middle names. So,
Ivan, you're Serbian, but you were born in Chicago.
I was born in Chicago, in Des Plaines, in 1986. And I grew up in multiple parts of Chicago. I was in Des Plaines, I can't believe I'm blanking on it right now, Ravenswood, and I went to high school in Lincolnwood, Skokie area, which to you doesn't mean much, but I was fortunate to finish high school 6 months early, and I ended up moving downtown and got to experience downtown living prior to leaving, which for anyone that lives in Chicago, I think that there's definitely something very special to enjoy. There's just such an energy downtown, and to be able to, take public transportation and go to all the amazing restaurants and bars, and there's millions of festivals during, the summer, because we used to have 4 seasons, but now it's more like winter for 8 months. And then a little bit of spring and fall and a little bit of summer. So once it gets nice out, everyone is just ready to be outside and enjoy themselves.
It's the city, the windy city, right?
Yes.
Because of the Lake Michigan.
Yes, that's correct.
So what I know, I'm a regular guy from Lithuania. What I know about Chicago, I believe, is two things. So first of all, I'm a big fan of TV
Michael
series
Jordan?
Shameless.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
Shameless.
so of course Jordan, that's
Yeah.
the goat. So Shameless,
Yeah.
and I know the South Side. How
Yeah.
do they call it?
The south side of Chicago.
That's the truth.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So when I was 18, I sold my first car and went in half and half with my father, and a little backstory. I grew up since I was 7. Every night I'd come home from school and I'd go to work with my father. My father was a flight attendant for United, but he also had an interior design business called Adriatic Design. And so every night I would go with him and retile a bathroom, paint places, you name it.
So you got golden hands.
I got
You can
golden
do it.
hands. I'm a jack of all trades. I got really great experience through him, and I am thankful for that for him. But so when I was 18, we went half and half, and we bought a place in the south side of Chicago, 59th and Paulina. And I'll never forget it because over those 5 months, it was quite an experience. You know, you drive into the city, and our next door neighbor was like, "What are you doing here? You're the only white people in the 10-mile radius." And so it was, you know, a bit of an adjustment, but we got to know our neighbors and stuff like that, and we're fortunate to establish a good relationship with them. And we remodeled the house, and over the course of that time, when we were starting to try and sell it, there was a guy that they called Home Depot. And you know why he was called Home Depot? He was called Home Depot because he was known for robbing Home Depot 7 times. Or I don't even know how many times. 7 is an important number because that's how many times he broke into our place when we were trying to sell it. One time he literally hooked up chains to the back door and ripped off the back door with a truck. And so every time we were trying to sell, he would steal the stove, he would steal our tools. And so ultimately what we ended up doing was we paid our neighbor across the street to sleep in the house for 2 weeks with a gun so we could actually sell the house. And fortunately, no one got hurt. There was one incident where he tried breaking in, and the neighbor put the gun out the window and shot a couple times, and he never came back.
That's fucking crazy. That's not a movie. That's the real story.
Swear to God.
How did you like my acting? But honestly, guys, this is the best tasting protein I have ever tried. I've been using cage since 2016. Just take a look at the ingredients. The ingredients will tell you everything you need to know about this product. This is whey protein isolate from Caged. Look at the ingredients. By the way, this is a chocolate peanut butter flavor. By far the best tasting protein. Let's take a look at the ingredients. Whey protein isolate, no milk protein concentrate, no whey protein concentrate, just whey isolate. Then we've got peanut flour, natural flavor. Then we've got cocoa powder, gum blend, just to make it a little bit thicker. Prohydrolase, which helps you digest this protein and absorb as quickly as possible. Then we've got stevia, which is a natural sweetener. No ASK, no aspartame. Stevia. And then we've got sucralose, just a tiny bit of sucralose just to get out of this stevia bitterness. That's it. Caged whey protein isolate is an incredible protein. I promise you, you won't be disappointed with the ingredients. You won't be disappointed with its flavoring. You won't be disappointed with the quality of this product. Now go to caged.com. Don't forget to use discount code APOLLO, APOLLO, and you will get 15% additional off all the products. You should definitely try this Caged whey protein isolate in a chocolate peanut butter flavor. It's amazing. Now let's get back to the podcast. And police knew everything.
Well, so the police actually liked us because from the time that we moved in there, we wanted the street to be good because we owned property there. And so we noticed drug dealings going on, and we called that first time the police to let them know. They ended up putting us in contact with a special unit. And so we were regularly calling them and cleaning up because we didn't want drugs going on that street. And so they were just constantly coming and picking up, you know, people. So, but it's an unfortunate thing because I do, you know, Shameless is an amazing thing that you brought up. I have friends that grew up there, and again, I spend time, and there's a lot of truth behind that type of livelihood where
Mhm.
when you're down and out and you don't have a pot to piss in, what are you going to do? So you're going to resort to a lot of things. And, you know, something that we talked about before we even started recording was the current situation. And it's unfortunate because there's always money for things in this world, or at least specifically talking about America. There's always money for certain things, but there isn't money to help our veterans. There isn't money for our homeless. There isn't money. I mean, perfect example. How much do we pay in taxes here in California? Why are our roads some of the worst roads in all of America? It's mind
That's true.
blowing. And the thing is that if more people woke up and had discussions about this and actually started to do something, and you know, you can't expect change if you're not willing to take the first step.
Yeah, but what you're gonna do? You're gonna do what the French do right now?
I'm not saying that
They
necessarily
destroy the
they
Paris.
destroy it, and it's not helping them. But at the same time, there's other ways, and if you're not talking about it, then it's just like, okay, well, let's put this under the rug, and it's going to be forgotten. Or hey, over here, let's go ahead and take a look at this, so that they're not thinking about this. Again, I'm in no ways the person that's going to solve these problems, but as I'm getting older, I'm 36 years old. I one day would like to have kids and a family. There's a lot of things that now, you know, you look at and you kind of start to think like, okay, like
That's not romantic, what I was used to, right?
it's just you didn't have to worry about a lot of the normal problems that most people do have to worry about. Especially, you know, when I moved to LA in my 20s, I was just having the time of my life, and I am so thankful for it because I enjoyed life very much.
Yeah,
But
but
now,
LA 20 years ago and LA now are two different cities, right?
completely different. It's
Thank
scary.
God it's not like San Francisco.
You know, it's scary because on top of that, it's like I am afraid for future generations where a lot of it has to do with what happened with COVID. You know, things haven't fully gone back, and people are not living. You know, even to this day, people are living in fear, and it's like, what are we going to do? We going to spend the rest of our time, you know, scared, or are we going to go back to enjoying life? Because tomorrow I can get hit by a car and die, or have a freaking stroke, or who knows what,
You can get shot.
very easily. Yeah. So, but you know, things will work out how they're going to work out. I am hopeful and optimistic that they're going to work out for the best. We just, like many things in life, things usually have to go bad until they get good.
Yeah, the pendulum swings both ways.
The question is, how bad does it have to get?
Yeah. Did we touch the bottom yet?
I don't think so.
Don't you think so?
I think it'd be a nice fantasy. I think it feels like bottom, but I think we're just in the beginning, which is scary.
So you know the funny thing about the Shameless, when you watch the TV series, for example, we were in Lithuania when we were watching those shows, and you think like, oh, that's impossible, that's not true. Even if that's true, that's kind of a romantic, you know, the gunshotting, the drug dealers, so that they're friends, so they can beat you up, but you're alive. Everything is romanticized.
Yeah.
There's nothing romantic in this, right? When you live in the neighborhood, when you hear shots, when you see the drug dealers, when you know that they're killings. Right now, Chicago is a mess, right?
It's unbelievable that they've
20
allowed it to get to this point, and the fact that they keep bringing people back in that are just making it worse. Because Chicago, it was really bad, and then they did a fantastic job of cleaning it up, and then the past mayor and now this new one is even worse than the past, where it's like, people, you need to wake up. You have to be conscious of who you're putting in charge of your city. You know, and California is a perfect example as well. Newsom, they almost got him out, and then they they brought him back, reelected him, and it's like, this guy does not care about the people of California. It's plain and simple. If he did, we wouldn't have the problems that we do have, or at least they'd be getting better, not worse. And all he keeps saying is, "Oh, I'm doing a great job." You have to be blind to see that he's not doing a great job. Now that's not to say that it's not an easy job. It's definitely,
It's
I
one
can
hell of a
imagine
job.
anything in politics is extremely difficult. But, actions are more powerful than words. And I take that to heart in many different ways. So
So you've been to Serbia, you've been to Europe. Have you ever been to Poland, Lithuania, the Baltic states?
so growing up, I was fortunate because my father worked for United. My mom actually said that from the time I have an older brother who's 5 years older, from the time I was 1, they put us on a plane together to Serbia, and we would spend all of summer in Serbia. So since then, I've missed maybe a handful of summers. But when we would go there, my mom was also Hungarian, so we'd go to Budapest, when Prague, and I've gotten to travel to different places. Not as many places I'd like, and I also, I was saying I'd like to go spend some time in Spain. But prior to moving to LA, almost 17 years ago, so let me backtrack. When I finished school, I finished high school 6 months early. The goal was always move out to LA, become an actor, or continue acting. But when I had finished school, right prior to finishing, I had people constantly telling me like, "Oh, you should try modeling. You should try modeling. I think you could be really great at it." And I was like, you know what? A lot of people are saying this. Maybe there's something there.
Mhm.
But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So when I was in high school, I was enjoying fast food and beer and a lot of other things that people that age enjoy. But I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this and really well. So over the course of a month, I completely changed my lifestyle. I don't want to say diet because I've continued eating proper, but I was eating really bad at that time, smoking a lot of pot. I would go from McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's back to back to back. And so in the course of a month, I lost 25 pounds. I mean, so fast that like every week I looked like a different person.
Mm.
And started modeling. And because of that, I was spending 2 months in Miami, 2 months in LA, 2 months in New York. I kind of bouncing around. And then I woke up one morning. My agents were kind of pestering me about going to Europe for modeling. And I woke up one morning at 6 in the morning and I was like, I'm gonna go do it. And got on a flight, one-way ticket, and went and lived in Germany, Serbia, and Milan for a year. And then I got asked to go to Singapore and Bangkok for 6 months. But by that time I was like, one, I'd been living out of 2 suitcases for a year. 2, my goal and purpose in life was to move to LA and pursue acting. And so I was like, you know what? It'd be a great, experience, but I need to do this. So I flew back to Chicago. I bought a car for $800 and spent $25,000 over the course of a month building this car into. I know when you're planning on moving across country, maybe not the smartest thing to build a race car, but yeah,
You wanted to get to it very fast.
very fast,
As fast as I can. Why I ask you in the first place about have you ever been to Europe? Because I believe every American should go to Europe just to see that the crimes they see in LA, New York, and Chicago
not
right
normal.
now, these are not normal by default.
Yeah.
For example, the roads that are in Spain, in Germany, in France, in Serbia, I believe, these are the roads that should be everywhere,
Yeah.
especially when you're in California where the climate is unbelievably good. Then when you see that there are no trash, for example, Lithuania is so clean, you would never find the trash, never on the street. But when I drive here, it's like a shocking to me. So I believe every American should go over there to see that this is not normal to have such crime, to have such road, to have such trash on the roadside, etc. Then go back and think that this can be changed. And from the other side, when you go to the Europe and you see all those narrow streets, all those I would even say right now, socialist countries, like Spain is a socialist country, Germany is a socialist country. They pay a lot of welfare to everybody. Norway, Sweden, etc. Americans would appreciate America even more because it's an unbelievable country. Look, you're Serbian, I'm Lithuanian. We meet not in Serbia, not in Lithuania, not in Spain. We meet here.
Melting pot.
It's a melting pot. I live in a complex
Yeah.
where I can meet one guy is from Morocco, another guy is from Japan, a family from Japan. The other guy with his family is from Russia, Ukraine, you name it.
Yeah.
They all go here. There's something in here. But I believe, just like you said, Americans don't value this as much as they used to 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. Well, to what you're saying. So one thing that I am forever grateful and indebted to my parents is, again, allowing me the fortitude to go to Europe every year, because I always considered it. My friends would be like, "Oh, like you're going again? Like, you know, we're gonna miss out on this." I'm like, that is my reset, because every time I go there, I realize I don't need that extra TV. I don't need to have 2 cars. I don't need all this extra materialistic things that we think we need here. You realize when you see people that, you know, a lot of friends, when I would go there, their families make $400 or $500 for the month.
Yeah.
But they're the happiest people around because they have family and friends.
Family is the value.
And, you know, to what you were saying about the roads, I was just talking to my mom about this. The fact that here, they'll give anyone a license. First off, why are they not pulling people over that are going slow in the left lane? Left lane is strictly for people who are driving at either the speed limit or faster. You go and you switch back.
In Europe,
they will ram you off the road if you
they're gonna
do
beep
that.
you. They're gonna like fuck you. What the?
Oh, you will learn your lesson quick.
Yeah.
But here, people are just, and everyone's on their cell phone. Oh, it's against the law. If it was against the law, why don't you actually ticket people? You know, so there's so many things, there's so many problems. And again, the question is, where do you start solving this, and who is the one that's going to do it? I think that, you know, not one person's going to do it. People have to start caring. And like you said, you know, if only people had the fortune to go and travel, a lot of people aren't able to. And that's understandable. It's not cheap, it's not easy. But the value that you have in experiencing other cultures. I always say that because of the fact that I was fortunate to go live in other countries and spend time, you know, at 17, 18 years old, I spend that time, you could put me anywhere and I can survive. And that to me is wealth. Having the experience in different cultures, that's wealth. I wasn't great in school, I wasn't academically smart, but I have smarts of how to communicate to a person that doesn't know the same language, you know, and there's so many different things that need to be looked at differently. The education system. What are you teaching kids? How many times a day do you use algebra? Why aren't you teaching them, you know, trades in schools should be taught? They're saying that at this rate, there's not going to be enough construction workers in 50 years. Because for every 100, 7 new start. And it's just, it's a crying shame, because guess what? If it's hard to make a living, those jobs, they're definitely going to be needed, and they definitely pay well. You know, and again, like a lot of people, it's easy to complain, but don't want to do the things that are difficult. You know, we were just speaking how I've found this new love of camping, being outdoors, disconnecting from, you know, technology. But I also enjoy it because it's hard. When I get back and I sleep in my bed, I'm like, man, I really enjoy this.
Yeah.
You know, so it makes me enjoy the things that I have. And I think that I keep going back to this reset thing. I like having these resets. Same thing, like over a pandemic, couldn't go to the gym, and I got out of shape for what I like to usually be in. And it was one of the hardest things to finally get back into it. And I said, I'll never do that again, because to me, it's not about looking good, it's about my mental state. And when I don't go for 2 days, I immediately start to decline. And, you know, it's a weird thing that growing up, I always thought either you're happy or you're sad. That's it. You know, like you're just naturally going to be one or the other.
Mm.
And, you know, several years ago, I realized, like, to be happy, it's work. And you have to every day wake up, and whether you're reading a self-help book, whether you're, you know, changing your habits, exercising, actually just telling yourself, hey man, I'm not living in a tent on the side of the street like a lot of other people. That's something I do daily because I'm like, hey, maybe you want more and you should. You should always strive for more. But have gratitude for the things you have because there's always going to be someone that has it worse. And there's always going to be someone that has it better. But you're in your situation.
So the more you travel abroad, the more you love America. Is that true?
Oh, are you kidding me? Like, I definitely love certain aspects of other places, and like specifically in a lot of European countries, I love the fact that most people walk a lot more, and you can walk places because places are closer, and there's cafes everywhere, and like after work, people put an effort to getting together, even if it's for a half hour. There's more social, aspects of life. Here, we live to work. There, they work to live. And I really appreciate that, and I've tried to find that here. But as I've said, I've multiple professions here, and find myself working 7 days a week. And I'm finally, after doing that for 3-4 years, I'm getting to my like empty, and I got to figure out what I'm going to do to change that because it's not healthy. But I do think that people that complain and people that find new things to social justice warriors and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, go see what it's like in another country. You think that you have it so bad? Go see when you're in line with 500 people to get a piece of bread, or, think about war. My grandfather was 99. He passed away in October. And he was an inspiration, He was my mentor. The man knew 6 languages. He worked as an artist his whole life. He's a very successful painter. He has paintings in museums. But, people always ask him, like, when are you going to retire? He says, the day I retire is the day I die. And I lost my train of thought how I got on my grandfather. What was I saying?
Your grandfather was 99 years old.
Yeah.
So he did see, and you did see.
Wars. That's what I was.
Yes.
I wasn't great in school, but I loved history. I think that history is, again, things that we can learn from that we should never, ever forget. When you hear about them taking away books from schools, I'm like, that
rewriting the books
is the biggest travesty ever. The fact that more people aren't appalled by that, you'll never be able to learn from something as well as history will always repeat itself unless you know the things that went on. But when he would tell me about World War II and how he was fortunate because of being a professor, he was also a professor of calligraphy for 35 years and an artist. He was with his friends and they were like, you're going to be the treasurer. His other friends all went to the front line. Immediately killed. And he was able to survive. But, hearing these stories, like here in America, we're so fortunate we don't see, things that other countries see. You don't see people, you don't see war, you don't see people dying, you don't, hear machine guns in the middle of the night and explosions and all that stuff. And like, that will change how you live your life very quickly. And we're so fortunate here that, yes, are there cities that have more crime than there should be? Absolutely. But
that's not war.
That's not war. You know as well as I do, like that is far, far from war.
Let's continue on this topic. So Yugoslavian War, it was lasting for a decade.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Serbia when the war was in Yugoslavia?
We went every summer.
Did you know that the lack of sleep kills more people on the road than drugs and alcohol combined? Do you have any idea why? Because when you lack sleep, you fall into micro sleeps. You just turn it off, that's it. But when you drive under influence of alcohol or drugs, you still have some kind of reaction. But when you fall asleep while driving, that's it, that's done. That's why proper sleep can literally save yours and your loved ones' lives. Me and my wife use Go Green Hemp products for years now. Just one little dropper just before we go to sleep, and that's it. We have a good night's sleep every time. We wake up fresh and recovered. I believe every one of you seek that, right? To wake up and feel refreshed. That's how we feel after we use Go Green Hemp products. Go Green Hemp products are proudly made in the United States. These are organic, non-GMO, and they are lab tested. Just take a look at the ingredients. We've got MCT, which is coconut oil. We've got CBD hemp extract. We've got organic peppermint oil. The flavor of this one is peppermint. And we've got stevia extract. That's it. No other unnecessary BS. Just go to gogreenhemp.com, use discount code APOLLO, APOLLO, and you will get 30% off store-wide. I really recommend you to try this CBD oil and get a nice, deep sleep at night and wake up fresh and recovered. And now, let's get back to the podcast. Tell me about it. What do you remember about that?
I was young, so I can't say a whole lot, but there was some times that I do remember, hearing off in the distance machine guns and bombs and stuff like that. And the only thing that I have to say about that whole thing and that war and any war is there is always going to be war, unfortunately, because man, we're amazing, we're an amazing species, but we're always going to have evil ones. There's always going to be an evil person. There's always going to be someone looking to do harm. And it's sad, but that's just the honest truth. But I don't condone war. I don't like it. I don't think that there's ever a winning side, if people die. But seeing firsthand, I have a story for you. When I was young and it was during the war, my friends and I, we were, I don't know, maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. And it was dark and we were out just kind of walking around, and where we would say my grandfather's place in Novi Belgrade, New Belgrade, there's all these buildings all along this way, and there's a park in the middle, but there's the road that goes like this. And so we're walking back to our apartment complex one night, and there's two people, and they're fighting over a parking spot. And to give you an example of how mentally broken people get, over that parking spot, they're fighting, and one guy pulls out a gun. Because it's that important to get this parking spot. Obviously it's not. No one's life is. But he was so mentally broken. He pulls it out. Luckily, he was a horrible shot. But my friends and I were behind the guy he was shooting at. And in Serbia, there's these big metal containers where, instead of every house has their own bins, no, you take out the trash and it goes in metal containers. Well, sure enough, we start hearing bullets flying off of the container behind us. And so we go running. Police end up coming. No one ended up getting hurt. But it's that type of thing of even if you're not the one fighting, you're going to be broken inside, mentally, physically. And it's just, no one wins.
And the war breaks people for decades.
Well, I don't know how it is in other places, but I know in Serbia right now, a big problem, and I have friends that have experienced it firsthand because they've lost loved ones. When the NATO bombing was happening, they used depleted uranium. 20 years later from the bombings, there is such high cases of cancer and death that it's astonishing. And, they filed lawsuits, but is anything gonna ever happen? Probably not. So I don't know. I personally don't like to discuss it too much because it's hard for any side. It's hard for me and my family thinking about the people that we know and we love. But for others, it's also difficult. Was it right for NATO to do that? I don't think so. I have, friends that talked about it, and it's 90 days of nonstop bombing is a bit extreme when what is Serbia compared to NATO? It's a speck. But, there's always going to be bullies that have to show how strong they are. I have a beautiful story though. One of my childhood friends, Luka Jeftovic, him and his sister Yana we've known each other since we were babies. And my mom went to grade school, has known their dad since they were 14. And my parents and their parents used to double date and all this stuff. But Luca told me this one story during the bombings that I'll never forget. And it's really beautiful and inspiring how people get united in the worst of cases. So one night, this is deep into the bombings, the sirens go off. And whenever the sirens go off, you go to the bomb shelters. And he was just like, if now is my time, now's my time. I'm not going. And he's a talented guitar player. He and a friend went out on their balcony and started playing and singing. And it's pitch black in the city because during the bombings, that's how it was. And one by one, people start coming out and unified start singing together. I was like, man,
That's strong.
it's beautiful. So
You see, even why I wanted to touch on this topic, because this war lasted for a decade, I believe, right?
yeah,
Can you say that it was a civil war? Because that was a big country, Yugoslavia, right?
yeah.
So we can call it a civil war. So we can only imagine what it feels like when people that have this almost they share the language, almost they share the culture, the history, etc., and they kill each other,
Yeah.
without any help from a side. Now, what I feel, what I see from the news, what I see from Twitter, etc., the biggest problem, the disaster that could happen to the U.S. is a civil war, and a lot of people talk more and more about this.
Absolutely.
2020 election, now it's coming. 2024 election.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have any external enemies when you kill each other right inside of your own country.
I mean, it's already happening.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. However, here's the thing: is there's a lot of people that, in my opinion, think that that's the solution, because they think that they have to completely change it from within. Thing is, they haven't been in war.
Yes.
You know,
I have no idea what it is.
will it change things? Hell yeah, it will change things. It'll change
In
it
a
for the
good way?
worse because it's going to destroy land. It's going to kill people, which that's the first. And who's to say that it's going to end up better on the outside, on the other side of things? You know, Yugoslavia was once a whole country, and from what I know, because of differences in what are wars usually over? Religion, wanting their independence and stuff like that. Look, to this day, most of the countries speak either the same language or same language with different dialects. And it's horrible. Like when I was in grade school, I used to get death threats from other kids that were, from former Yugoslavia. And one kid was like, "I'm gonna slice your throat with a freaking ice skate," and that was going on for a long time. Now, years later, it's it's under the rug. It doesn't matter. That's influence from parents and not knowing what's really going on. But it's that type of thing where if we get to that point here, especially because we are known or were known as one of the greatest nations, when are people going to realize that we have to start building it back together? Everything that you're seeing in social media, which social media is an amazing thing, don't get me wrong, but it's dividing people. And it's I think you mentioned earlier, like there has to be some type of ploy somewhere where why can you not turn on the news and see something good? Why can't you turn on the news and see something relevant to actual problems that are going on in the world? But instead you see about reality TV and you see about, Trump, who hasn't been the president. Yes, now he's coming back in, but why have we been talking about Trump for so long? It's it's kind of crazy. Like I used to, when I wanted to know what was going on in the world, I would call up friends in Serbia and be like, "Hey, what's going on in the news there?" Because that was my way of finding out the truth, which is crazy. The news should not hide things from you. We should be able to go there, but that's a lost profession. True journalism.
Yeah, so war is always a disaster. It brings nothing but tragedies to the families, to the whole generations. I hope this will never happen here in the US, but as far as we can see, the more people are divided, the more and more people are divided, and they are divided in just regular, simple questions like the politics, the views, the
Yeah.
socialists, the capitalists. They hate each other. They don't want to sit and talk. Don't want to discuss. They don't want to find something in common. Which in common is the common thing that they have is this country that was founded 250 years ago, and still to this day, till 2023, there are millions and millions of people that go to the US every day.
Yeah.
Because they want that. They want capitalism. They want to have a social lift. They want
a chance at a good life.
Yes, yes. Because in their own country, they can't do that.
You know, I think that things like this, like podcasts, I never was a big listener of podcasts, but as of recently, Joe Rogan, Modern Wisdom, there's different ones that I've been introduced to that I've been listening to. I think that there is a lot of good to come from that because discussions that aren't going on in the mainstream media are going on because it's different individuals discussing different topics. And, you know, what better thing do we have than discussion? Like you mentioned, like politics. It doesn't matter what side you're on. You should be able to discuss things and debate things and actually hear each other out. It's come to a point where people don't want to hear people. And it's like, if you don't believe me and if you don't stick on my side, then you're wrong and that's that. How is that possible? That's bullshit.
Yes.
You're being stubborn, pig-headed, and you're an idiot. Because ultimately, we're all humans. We all live in the same place. Why don't we find out what we have to do to make our place better? And so, you know, I think things like this is valuable. People need to discuss things, and people need to remember things that have happened and things that possibly could come, you know, and you know, listen to other discussions. I find so much value in listening to podcasts where, you know, I don't always agree with things that I hear and I don't always find them interesting, but I'm like, oh, that's an interesting take on that. Maybe I should look into this a bit more before I have an actual say or opinion on it. Because that's another thing. Clickbait. People just read the headline and they're like, that's that. Did you do any research? Did you read the article? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, you see, but on the other hand, so I believe that there are some topics that are not, that you can't even discuss. For example, I will never discuss with you or with any other people on planet Earth a topic, for example, pedophilia. If someone says, well, it's not that bad, maybe it's not that evil, that's not black, that's great. I don't want to even discuss.
But that is your choice, and that's why it's great that we're here in America. You have that choice to say, listen, respectfully, you want to talk about that? That's great. Find someone else. That's not for me. And that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, but what I wanted to say is we can discuss politics and I can change my mind, or you can change my mind, I can change yours.
Yeah.
But I will never change my mind on a certain topics,
Yeah.
for example, pedophilia. You will never change. I
Of
know
course.
that's evil, that's it. That's the baddest thing that a human can do to other human, to children. But discussing on other topics such as religion, politics, or everything, absolutely, yeah, people should do that, and they should not be ashamed to change their opinions and say, yeah,
Learn.
I've learned some stuff. Maybe I could change.
Hey, man, the one skill that we have that we're born with is the ability to learn. Don't ever stop learning. It's freaking amazing. You know, like, and to your point, yes, there's some topics that don't need to be discussed because, I mean, to debate that, if I don't see who would view that differently, specifically pedophilia. I mean, like anything with children.
Nowadays, you can say pedophile. You should say minor attractive person.
Well,
Can you
I'm
imagine this
sorry,
thing?
I'm
You
not
can't
gonna.
even name those guys.
So, and that's the other thing, is just telling people what they need to say. Like, I can't get on board with a lot of stuff. Like, I'll respect others in whatever way and stuff like that, but like, to me, that's just ludicrous, and I'm not going to get on board with that. If you are attracted to a child, that's wrong. Period. You're a pedophile. Done. End of discussion. You can't change that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, oh man, we should move on. That's.
Speaking of learning some new things, so now you got a new show that you're filming with your mother.
Yes.
You cook Serbian food.
So it's called MI Cooking, Magda and Ivan's cooking show. The show came about basically because I was telling my mother that I would love to learn her recipes. You know, it pains me to think that one day she's not going to be here. And you know, I recently moved my mother and my grandfather last year from Chicago. Went back, packed up the whole house, drove across country. And part of that was, one, I wanted my family closer so I can take care of them. But two, someone said something to me that made me think that they were like, okay, your mom lives in Chicago. How often do you go home? Once a year. Okay. So if she has, let's say, 10, 15 years left on this earth, that means you're going to see her 10, 15 more times?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And when I heard it broken down like that, I was like, oh my God. So fortunate, I gave her my apartment and I moved into the apartment next door to me. She's 3 feet away, which has been a little bit of adjustment because I grew up, I mean, I've lived on my own since I was 17. I'm 36. Having her right next door is amazing, but also, again, an adjustment. And when they first moved here, grandfather got sick. Things were upside down. So I was thinking about it. I was like, I would love to know these recipes, but I'm a visual learner. And I was like, why don't we record them? That way I can always go back to it. And a lot of them, look, she's part Hungarian and Serbian. When she was 9, her mom got sick, so she had to start cooking. And that's how she learned. You know, she felt bad for her mom. She was like, let me take on the responsibility. And she learned, Hungarians are known for being domaćice. They have amazing dishes. So there's Hungarian dishes, Serbian dishes, and a lot of worldly dishes. But so I was like, let's record them. That way I have something to review later. But at the same time, I'm like, why don't we share it with the world? Maybe someone else is going to enjoy these recipes. And so we started the show. We haven't launched it yet because working as a creative director and in the marketing world, you always want to have a backlot of material before you start something, because when I started one of my jobs, I didn't have anything, and from the get-go, it was always playing catch-up, and it was like, oh, I need content, scrambling, how am I going to get this content? And I was like, I want 10 episodes before we release anything. But it's been cool because it's also, it's a beautiful way that I get to spend time with her, you know, and the first 2 episodes, I was like, we got to do something that people are going to understand what it is. If we go right into making goulash, not everyone's going to be like, oh man, goulash, let me learn how to make that. So I was like, first episode, fried chicken. Everyone loves it. Let's do that. We just made mastacholi 2 days ago. So
what's that?
Mastacholi is like lasagna. It's a famous Italian dish, but basically you do veal, or you can do beef, and it's got this sauce, but then you use Parmigiano and mozzarella, and you layer it, and then you bake it.
Man, and you speak like Italian, mozzarella. A few years ago, I believe that was like 5, maybe 7 years ago, I figured out that the only woman in our family that knows the recipes of those traditional Lithuanian dishes is my grandmother. Because my mother died, she didn't even reach 50. Yeah, she was an alcoholic. And once I figured out that only my grandmother knows how to make all those traditional dishes from Lithuania, I said to my wife, you should learn from her. You should learn how to cook these dishes.
Absolutely. Keep the tradition.
Yes, and they're so tasty. I grew up.
Well, it
eating.
brings you back to your childhood immediately. It's like music can bring you back to a certain time in your life, but it's same with food where you're like, oh man, you're like you could remember exactly a time and a place that you were eating it.
Have you noticed? You've mentioned music, dishes. Have you noticed that? Uh, Not perfume, but
Scent, your
sense.
sense of smell.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There is a time when you go somewhere, you enter some room, or you go to
You're
a
like
restaurant. You're like,
grandpa's studio or
what's
this or
that?
that.
Yeah, what's that? And it takes you like 20 years in the past
Yeah.
when you were
It's
7 years old.
Our senses are so strong, and what they can do for us is really kind of amazing. I've been struggling since COVID to regain my sense of smell and taste, which really sucks because I do love to cook as well. Um, I'm confident I'll find some way to get it back fully, but I'm only at 50%. Um, but it would be really an amazing thing for you to be able to do that and then carrying it on with generations. Because again, what do we say about history is all we have,
Yes.
and especially our own personal family histories and our cultures. And I was fortunate. The school, all the schools I went to in Chicago, but specifically my high school, we were one of the most culturally diverse schools in the nation. I mean, literally, you name it. There was different cliques of every type of nationality. But it was always great because, in like grade school, you have culture day and everyone brings their own dishes and you get to try a little bit of everything. And granted, when you're younger, you're not as open to trying new things, but it's those are the things that we should be standing behind. And those are the things that we should hope that our schools are pushing for. Now, that I don't personally have kids, but I hear from friends that have kids, and the things that I hear that are going on in schools, I'm like, I don't think if I have kids, my kids are going to go to school. They're going to be homeschooled.
Homeschool.
That way I have control over the things that they learn and the environment that they're in, because
The narrative.
life could be a lot easier had I learned about the importance of money. Granted, I'm very happy with where I'm at, but how are we not taught money in school? Like the most important thing for surviving,
Money, communication,
all
relationships,
those things.
family, the values.
I mean, basic things that you need to survive as a human being and be a normal, outstanding citizen, you're not taught in school. Maybe they somehow just forgot to do it, or maybe there's a reason for it.
Yeah, but after 2020, the more and more people they take their kids away from school.
Absolutely.
They homeschool them.
But not everyone can. I mean, look at the families that can barely even survive with their kids in school and working 3 jobs and stuff like that. And it's like there's a big divide, and I feel like if you look at what America was in the 1950s and 60s, and even perfect example with nutrition. Look at old photographs and videos of people then and now.
On the beach.
They're huge. And now, could it be a lot from people just not exercising or doing that? Absolutely, that is a part of it. But having lost a lot of weight in a small amount of time, 80% of your weight is what you eat. And now, as I'm getting older, even more, I've put such an emphasis, and we're cooking and stuff. We go to the farmer's market as much as possible. From Lithuania, in Europe, what do people do when they buy their food? 90% of the time, they go to a market where the farmers come. One of my fondest memories is anytime you get close to a market, you smell the fruit, you smell all the foods because they're natural.
Yeah, I can still remember those markets.
Whenever I have friends, whenever I meet someone that comes from a different country, they eat meat, chicken, steak, whatever. And they're like, "What is this?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, this isn't meat." I'm like, after a while, I picked up. I'm like, "Yeah, that's because the meat here is just so, it's not naturally, sustained."
Yeah, you gotta go organic. In the U.S., I've been told that you gotta go organic with fruits, vegetables, meat,
Everything.
eggs, everything.
Spend
Otherwise,
more
you're gonna be
money and moderate how much you're eating, how much you're taking in. But back to that whole thing, it's like, again, look at that. there's such a divide in how people look. There's a divide in when you were a janitor in America, you can own a house and raise a family and all that stuff. Why is it that the inflation is gone and the costs, the salaries haven't stayed up with it? It could have, but it hasn't. So people need to start, questioning these things, and they need to start asking around, and they need to make sure that we don't allow it to continue on like this, because then it's just going to be filthy rich people that were fortunate because they either were smart and got lucky, or they had money in their family, and then everyone else.
That's not the future that you're talking about. You say that then there are rich people that have billions and billions, and there are families that can't even afford the normal food. And you were speaking of a period of time of the United States where a plumber could afford a house and pay for the bills and care for his family. And that was like back in the 50s, 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
During the Cold War. So that was not the best time of the world, but still the US was thriving.
Yeah.
Right now, there's kind of a peace in the world, but people are not thriving. They're not they
I mean, that's a whole other topic, Places usually strive for war because it's a way to make money. It's a known fact. It's prosperous for certain people and, very unfortunate for others. But that's just, again, there's certain things in life that we know and we just kind of put a blind eye to, and it's like, I don't know.
Speaking of history, for example, you've mentioned that there are certain cuisines in Europe, and for example, when we speak about Italy, we always remember that amazing food, sea, beaches, and etc. Serbia does have such things that come up to mind when you say Serbia? Because I can't remember any of them.
Well, so a lot of people actually don't even know. The funniest thing that always happens when I say I'm from Serbia, lately more and more people know because they've visited and it's become a lot more of a tourist destination. But then there's the other side that it happened a couple weeks ago where it was like, Serbia, isn't it freezing cold? It's like, you're thinking about Siberia. And they're like, oh my God, yes. And I'm like, I could see where
you're going.
Yeah, but no, it's actually very similar to Chicago temperature. They almost have the same seasons, everything to the T. But Serbia, over the past 10, 15 years, there was actually, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I was on the plane and they had like top 10 destinations for party and nightlife and whatever. Belgrade was one of those places. But I always find it interesting in the past 5 years that I've been there, walking around the city. I love to walk around the city. And now I can walk around and I hear every language. And I'll spark up conversations with different people. I'm like, oh, what brought you here? Came here to teach English, fell in love, moved, ended up moving here. Another one, they wanted to try the food because they heard amazing things about the food. Again, the nightlife is outstanding. But the cool thing is there's so many different things to try. From food, pretty much any restaurant that you go to, you're going to feel like you're eating at home with some family.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Hands down, you will not have a meal that you feel like is processed or whatever. You're always going to feel like, wait, where's your mom at? Tell her I really like this soup. That's how it's going to be. And that's sad that we can't experience that here when we should be able to. And again, I love being here. I have to always reiterate it. I do. But there are certain things where I'm like, I want everyone else here to experience going to any restaurant and being like, man, this was the best meal I've ever had.
Have you ever been to Italy?
I have. I lived in Milano.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then I love Florence.
Have you ever tried just simple margherita pizza?
That is the best thing that exists. And you can literally have a whole pizza and it's like one slice.
It has nothing on it.
Nothing. And it's paper thin.
Yes. It's so tasty. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Just margherita. No ham, no other meat, no onions, nothing. Cheese, tomato sauce, and
Just,
the
I
pad.
mean, honestly, just thinking about it, like in the mornings you go, you get your coffee, you get your croissant. Like, there's just such a sense of like peace. Like, I don't know. Again, it's different when you're there on vacation and they're living, but I think that goes back to the thing where I'm like, man, I would really like if different areas had more cafes and more opportunities for people to walk around. And I, I think it would be good for us to be able to be social more. You know, here in LA, it's a perfect example. It took me 45 minutes to get here from Hollywood. Not too bad, but 45 minutes. And I personally, because I work a lot, but then at the same time, just social life has kind of diminished where I don't see people going out as much. I've mentioned before, you know, people get done with work and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna meet up with you. Like I just worked all day.
Yeah, 'cause
So
you're
what?
45 minutes away.
So what? You should meet up and enjoy each other's company and you know, like I have some of my closest friends and I see them a couple of times a year or you know, lucky if it's once a month, and that's ridiculous.
Wait till you get the kids. So
I can only imagine.
actually, I can remember of two things about Serbia, and I don't know if you're gonna approve that or no. So one is basketball.
Of course.
You're good at basketball. Lithuania and Serbia,
Yeah.
these are enemies.
I was there in
30 years.
I was there when we won the world championship.
Crazy.
That was the most crazy thing I've ever seen. I would imagine similar to when they won the World Cup. If you're in a country that wins, I was walking down the street with my friends, and people were standing on the roofs of the cars, lighting fireworks, shooting guns. It was nuts, and probably one of the coolest things I've seen to date. But yes, sports, basketball, tennis, soccer,
Jok?
yeah, Djokovic. We don't have. Again, it's not the most wealthy country. We've been ridden with war for so long, but people focus on things that they have that they don't need a lot of money for. In sports and health and that type of stuff, it's fun, it's competitive, and you can get really good at it if you know you have the time. And again, like Djokovic, he built tennis courts in Kalimagdan, which is an old fortress along the river. And every time I go, I love going there. One, they have an old war museum. You can see all the old tanks and stuff like that. And that fortress, if you go and you learn about it, like there was Turkish, the Turks, you know, ruled a lot of that area.
Yeah.
So there's so much history to be learned, and it's really cool to see the things that have kind of stuck around to this day. But sports it's
Yeah. So
everything.
sports is number one. What do you think I would say number two is about Serbia? Yes.
For you, it's like what
I
you
believe
remember?
for all the people that know just a little bit of Serbia.
Okay, that's a good question. Because I know what I would say, but I'm assuming that what I would say is far different. I don't know.
Slavic women.
Oh,
They're so pretty.
yes, they are.
And they stand out in the whole world.
You know what the biggest thing is? And I get why women here are different, but I love the fact that I go there and girls, they'll maybe put lipstick on, maybe. Some women, they do put more, and definitely there's more Western influence, so there's a lot more things that you're seeing that are changing. But I love the fact that they have the confidence to be like, I'm going to get coffee. I don't need to freaking put a full face of makeup.
Yeah, but they're naturally beautiful.
Naturally beautiful. But it also, you have to think the amount of makeup that women wear every single day. One of my jobs is a creative
Yeah.
director for a makeup brush brand. I know what can happen when you don't properly take care of your brushes. You know, like that. You're destroying your skin. You got to give it a break sometime. But yes, so the sports, the women, women all over there is just
Yeah, that's the whole region. Like
it leaves you speechless.
Serbia, Croatia, when you go north,
Yeah.
Czech Republic,
Oh, yeah.
Poland, Lithuania, the Baltic states, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. I don't know. I'm married to a Slavic woman.
She's very
These
pretty.
these are the most beautiful
Yeah,
women on earth.
yeah.
And I know that when tourists come to those places, when tourists come to Lithuania, they're like,
I recently, as of recent years, I have friends that have gone to Serbia, which without my influence, and it's really cool to hear their experiences. But that's number one that they talk about.
they mentioned this, right?
Yeah, and then they're like, "Oh my God, the nightlife." They're like, "I can get a bottle at a club for $40, and you know whatever." Again, the cost of living is so different. I mean, I always say to people like, I go usually at the end of my trips and take out like 15, 16 of my friends to dinner, drinks, and dessert. For a whole dinner with tip, I'll pay like $175. Granted, in recent years, I hear that it's gone up because inflation throughout the world.
Yeah.
But again, like when you're coming from America, that's like
$200 is nothing right
that's you're lucky if you spend that on a meal yourself in America.
now. Yeah, with the tips.
Yeah. So yeah, there's but the food also just
Is there any restaurant, Serbian restaurants in LA?
the only one that I know of that is a Bosnian restaurant that has similar stuff is called Aroma Cafe. It's on the west side, and it's off of Overland. And I'll a lot of times ask them to give me. I'll go and pick up if I'm having friends over cevapi, which are these little sausages. It's actually a Slovenian dish, but I'll go and pick it up from them because it's just easier and grill it at my house. But so there isn't a lot. I think there were more about 20 years ago. I hear from people that live here, but not like Chicago. Chicago is the second largest Serbian community in the world
Oh, really?
outside of Belgrade. And there's plenty of butchers and restaurants and all that stuff. Yeah.
So here's an idea. Your mom should open a
So
restaurant.
we thought about it, and not even necessarily Serbian, but just I really wanted to open up Adriatic and something that was more so breakfast and lunch. But one, costs money, a lot of money to start, and two, I'm like, unless I could really find good people to have her teach, I feel she's worked her whole life so hard, taking care of my brother and I, taking care of my father while they were together. Taking care of my grandfather for the past 20 years, and she deserves to live. So that's why she's here. I'm like, spend half the year in Europe, in Serbia, or wherever you want. Spend the other half here and start living. You're 72. Like, you need to enjoy life. She's had it rough, and she deserves a chance. So, you know.
Getting back to Serbia, Serbia is a very religious country, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's Christian Orthodox, and there's a whole lot of turmoil around Kosovo and that whole thing, which I don't. It's known as our most religious area, but obviously there's been a lot of fighting going on over it and whatnot. So, but there's two churches here that we go to. I don't go to church as much as I'd say I'd like to, or even as much as other people do. But I think that it's great that there is a community here. And when my grandfather was sick, our priest, Father Nick, he came and he read his last rites, and he was very supportive in the whole process. It was a very difficult time because when I moved them over here, I wasn't able to quickly change his address, and so when he got very ill, I wasn't able to get hospice. And I was constantly at Social Security, and I was like, I need help. I had to learn how to feed him, change him, all in bed because he was bedridden. And the day that I went over there and he was in a coma, took him to the ER, and to show you how much will this man had at 99. 20 years prior, he had 3 heart attacks. His heart was operating at 20%. And I told the doctor, I was like, I just don't want him to suffer, you know. Give him something so that he's not suffering, because you could see that he was suffering. And they're like, well, if we give him morphine, there's a chance of his blood pressure dropping. And I was like, I understand what you're saying. I was like, don't let him suffer because I have power of attorney. I was like, let me call my mom and see if she wants to be here in case. So she came, gave him it. He calmed down. Over the course of 7 hours, decrease, decrease, decrease. And he passed. Only to, after a couple of minutes, come back to life all of a sudden. And my mom and I are like freaking out. We're like, what the fuck is going on here? Doctor's like, we've seen this in people who are younger. Basically all the energy in your body goes to your heart and reignites it.
Mm-hmm.
That happened 4 times.
Man.
4 times until finally he was fully, and
What period of time was it? Was an hour? 4 times or days?
no. Over the course of like 2 hours, he came back, would pass and come back.
That's crazy.
But 20 minutes after that, I get a call from Social Security being like, great news. We got him in his hospice. And I was like, thanks.
I've got great news as well for you.
He just died. So the system here, there's so many flaws, but I don't hold it against anyone. And I feel fortunate to have spent the last 6 months with him. And I wish he was in better condition because he got dementia. He didn't always know that I was there, but I'll never forget. He said, he goes, I don't have the money to pay you, but I'll watch over you. I was like, of course, like I'll do anything for you. And I think it was a lot easier. I know it helped my mom because it's her dad. To have to do the things that I was doing would be very difficult. But on top of it, for him, for comfort, he doesn't want his daughter to see him like that. And, so there's always different things that you can see. If you change your perspective, there's always a good outcome from things, and I think that's one of the most valuable lessons I learned in life. Whenever you feel like things are going bad, take a moment and be like, what's the other side of this situation? Is there something good from it?
Yeah.
You never know.
And speaking of gratitude, once again, how thankful we are for just being here. So did your grandfather play the big role in your childhood? Did he replace your father? Was the father figure at home when you were growing up?
Growing up, Dad, he was a flight attendant, so he was gone a lot. We also butted heads a lot because he was an alpha, I was an alpha, and I always, I just didn't want to be told what to do. Granted, but also he growing up, he was an only child, and his parents were well off. But to give you an example, when his mother would want to take a nap, they would kick him out of the house because his dad, all he cared about was his mom. So he'd be like, "Get out of the house! She's taking a nap." So it was that type of mentality of.
And the apartment was so small?
No, it was huge. Wow, I used to love going there, but they would kick him out. But, so ultimately, he didn't get the warmth that someone needs. And so when I was living in Serbia, I lived with his cousin, and she gave me this book that was called Muškarci koji vole da mrze žene. It means men who love to hate women. Something along those lines. I might have mixed it up. And I taught myself how to read Serbian, the Latin version, when I was reading this book. How you read it is how you say it is how you write it. And I learned that the way that my dad behaved when we were growing up wasn't his fault. It's actually a condition. I mean, it was to the T like someone wrote a book about my dad.
Mm.
And so my parents were together up until, I want to say it was almost 20 years ago. And we had times, for where we lived, we were a bit more on the lower end, lower class. We were always kind of scraping by. My mom always found a way to make sure that, my brother and I had everything we need, even if it meant her sacrificing things. But then we started making our own wine at home. We did 140 gallons a year in the basement cellar. And it was a really great experience to learn how we would buy the grapes crushed, and then my dad and I would go through the fermentation process and everything. And it was, again, Knowledge is power. It's an amazing thing. But at the same time, when you have 140 gallons of red, white, and rosé,
You drink it.
you drink it. And he ended up becoming an alcoholic. And I also think he may have been bipolar or something, but again, it has to do with how he was raised. He didn't know how to show his love. So it was always like either things were amazing or they were horrible. The highs were high and the lows were low. But like generally, anytime there was a holiday, ended in crying. And through most of school, like I would always sleep in school because I would spend the night staying up trying to make sure that they weren't fighting and stuff like that. And you know, it's pays a toll, but I would never change anything because it made me the person who I am today. And I always, part of the reason why I left the house so young was because I was like, I want to become my own person so that my kids and my family never has to go through the things I did. And, you know, I'm grateful for a lot of things, but at the same time, like, he did a lot of stuff. And so I haven't talked to him in probably almost 15, 20 years. I don't even know. I found out that when they got a divorce, I was already living in Serbia or in LA, but he was seeing my dad's cousin's best friend, who I met prior to him meeting when I was living there.
Mhm.
And for 3 years, my mom, she is old-fashioned. She's like, we're gonna work through it, you know, whatever. Finally, my mom, who's not technologically savvy, she found letters and stuff like that on his email. And finally, after 3 years, she was like, enough's enough. Changed the locks. And I told him, I went back and I was like, look, I thought I was taught differently. You don't do this to your wife. You treat women with respect and all that stuff. But I was like, but you're a grown up and we can still have a relationship. But then I found out through Facebook that he had kids and a new wife. He got married to her and had kids. And I have one thing that I'll never change in my life. A person is only as good as their word. And I'm like, if I don't have your word, and if you don't think telling me that you have a new family is worth it, then we don't have anything. Now, years later, that anger that I had for him has turned more to sorrow. I feel sorry that went that way. I always growing up wanted to have that iconic American father-son relationship. Even like the first car that I built, I took out the engine in the garage by myself. And I would always be like, come help me out. And he didn't understand, one, what I was doing because he thought I was crazy. But two, I was just trying to get him to come and do something with me. So we had an activity together. And so now I hear he's not doing well. He lives in Serbia with the family. And I hear that the boys aren't happy, just kind of repeating history. But I'd like to make peace. Not for him, but for me, you know? Just have coffee and kind of, you know, let bygones be bygones. I don't have to love the way that you lived your life or you behaved and stuff like that, but like, you're still my dad, you know, and I'm fortunate at least that he's alive. There's a lot of people that don't have their parents, you know, you've lost yours, and I've heard that he's ill from all the alcohol. So it's going to be something I'm going to make a point this summer to try and reach out and at least, if there's time left, to make peace.
You know, that is very interesting because I remember myself, I'm 35. I remember myself like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I was already grown up. I was living on my own, and I was mad at my dad because I was remembering all the time when, in my childhood, when I was coming back from school. He was coming back from his job, and I was like, let's go and play basketball. No, I'm too tired. Let's go and play football. No, I'm too tired. And he was always watching the TV. And I was mad, maybe angry at him at that time. And then I remembered when I was 20 years old, I was like almost always going through these moments in my head. And recently, again, maybe 5, maybe 7 years ago, I realized one thing. So he was the dad that he was because of his dad.
History repeats itself.
Yeah. And I talked to my grandmother, my father's mom. Tell me about how was his dad. Oh, he was an alcoholic. He wasn't at home. He didn't spend any time with my dad. Oh, I got you. Then I thought, wait a minute. What about my grandfather's father, my
Yeah.
grandfather? Oh, that guy was a mess as well, even worse. So that was a gradation from grandfather. My grandfather was a bit better dad. My father was a better dad. So I have to become even a better dad. So that's an evolution.
Mhm.
But when you realize this, that my father is the way he is because of his father, his family, and maybe something happened in the childhood, and etc. So you come to a conclusion just like you did. He is my father. I don't have to be mad at him. I don't have to be the enemy of
Mhm.
his. We have to. Maybe we won't. We surely won't get those moments when I was a teenager, when I was 10 years old, 18 years old. But still, we can. At least we can respect each other.
Well, we only have one, set of parents, but also the other thing that I think everyone needs to come to terms is I just realized the amount of damage and pressure and energy that it took for me to be angry.
Mm,
I was the only one that was losing.
and time consuming.
You know, in a lot of things in our life, we stress about the little things, and we create such majority of problems that we create for ourselves. But again, it goes back to what are you doing to check in every day, and what are you doing to better yourself and grow every day? Like there's so many things that it's a lot. Life is a lot of work, but it could be great if you want it to be, and I think that it's an ever revolving door of finding new ways to look at things, finding new ways to behave, finding new habits, and hopefully at the end you're going to be happy with it. My biggest fear is to have regret. I don't ever want to regret something. And I think that part of me bringing up working a lot is I'm realizing that I've burnt myself out, that even when I do have time, I don't reach out to anybody because I'm like, I don't have the energy to go out. And I'm like, that's crazy because I'm not going to be 36 again. I'm not going to be 26 like I was 10 years ago. That time is something we can't get back. And I'm like, things got to change because I don't want to spend it at home tired. You know what I mean? I moved to LA for acting. I love my profession. I've been fortunate over the past years to get to a certain point. I'd love to get to another point. But I also look back and I'm like, I'm so fortunate that I stuck with it, first off, because when I want something, I don't stop until I get it. And if it means I'm going to pursue it my whole life, then that's that. But then second is I've seen the growth. And that is, to me, more important than the final result, because it'd be one thing had I been doing this and I'm not getting better. But I've been getting better. It shows. I've been getting better roles. I mean, this past year, I got to audition for lead roles in studio films, which I've never gotten to. Lead roles on TV shows. I auditioned for Mission Impossible, the new one that's coming out. All these things that I never 5 years ago would have gotten an opportunity. Now, have I booked them? No. But is the opportunity there? Absolutely. And as long as it's there, I'm going to keep going at it until I get that, opportunity. Because in this business, all it takes is one thing for people to be like, where has this guy been? And so guess what? When that door is knocking, I'm going to open it and I'll be ready for it.
Speaking of this door and where was that guy? Do you remember the Inglourious Bastards?
Absolutely.
Christoph Waltz?
I mean, one of the most spectacular actors, and his wealth of knowledge and language is just like, when you watch him, you're like, how the fuck is he doing this?
Who are you?
Yeah.
Incredible talent.
Yeah.
And he was discovered when he was, I believe, 50 plus years.
A lot of guys, a lot of people that aren't familiar with the industry, they're like, that's so lucky. He just made it out of nowhere. And it's like, no, you didn't see the past 20 years that he's been knocking on that door. Yeah.
Yes.
But same type of thing. Mark Ruffalo didn't start until later. I mean, even Harrison Ford, he was a bit older. And so Christopher Waltz is a great example of that. But again, and it's such a talent.
Yeah. And once again, that's why we're here. Not in Serbia, not in Lithuania, not in Spain, but we're here in LA, in the United States, where everything is possible. You work hard, and you hope that it clicks one day.
As long as you, persistence always prevails. I'm a fond believer of that. And as long as you keep knocking, the question is, how long are you willing to knock?
Yes.
And but it is kind of, it's funny that you brought up the that we're in America. So 4 or 5 years ago, because both my parents are from Serbia, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get my dual citizenship because why not? It's something I'm able to do, and I'd like to keep my heritage and whatnot. And on top of it, I was like, who knows that maybe one day there won't be an opportunity for me to do my profession, there. Well, sure enough, years ago, I get a call from a casting office in Serbia, in Belgrade, that I was always in contact with. And they knew I came every summer. And they called me and go, hey, Ivan, you're coming this summer, right? I'm like, yeah. They're like, great. There's a show called SEAL Team on CBS. They're filming here for 4 weeks. We want you to audition. I was like, fantastic. So I auditioned and didn't hear anything back. And then a week later, they're like, hey, we're just waiting on approval from CBS. And I was like, what? And I was like, what does that mean? They're like, well, they just got to give the green light and you got it. Sure enough, it wasn't till I was heading to the airport, because I had already bought my ticket, that I got approval and the script, and I landed, and the very next day I started filming. And I had a guest star on there, and it was such an amazing experience to be in the city that my parents grew up in.
That was Chicago Fire?
No, that was SEAL Team. Chicago Fire was recently. But that was also to film in Chicago, being from Chicago, right off of Michigan Avenue, was such a cool thing. So 2 things that I got to check off my list of wanting to do.
Speaking of growth, the biggest growth I got in my whole life was when I got my kid. So, and the growth was, and still is till this day, every day I get a bit better at some aspects. And the growth that I got was almost in every aspect of my life. How do I deal with my emotions? How do I deal with my money? How do I deal with my health, with my wealth, and etc. So, I hope you'll get your kids.
I hope so
they're gonna
too.
grow like
The
crazy.
one thing that in California I've noticed, in Los Angeles particularly, not to say that it's not possible, but dating has been a bit more of a challenge. I don't believe in dating apps.
Mhm.
I'm old-fashioned. I believe that if you meet a person, almost instantaneously, you're going to notice whether or not you guys have chemistry, whether or not there's a possibility of something working. And I just flat out don't like texting. I'm a caller. I want to be on the phone, and so I don't care to sit there and chase after girls. And I also just the values that I have are more traditional. What are your morals, and who are you as a person? And I'm finding a lot of instances where it's kind of like, well, what can you do for me? And these are the things that I want. And it's like, well, hold on. What are we going to do together? Because if we're together, that's a partnership. So what are you naming off things that you want? Like this is, I'm applying for some position. You know what I mean? Like it's just not right, and it's not fair. And I think that people need to reevaluate how relationships are and how they should be. I'm speaking, and I'm not even in a relationship. But
Yeah, they say that 1+1 is not 2 in a relationship, but 1+1 is 11. Because the things that family brings you, you can't even describe this.
Yeah.
Because the feeling when you get home from work, from job, from everything, from maybe you went to Serbia, went to other cities, etc. But when you come home and you know that the wife waits there is a child, maybe there are some children, the energy, the motivation, everything that comes with marriage, with kids, with family is undescribable.
Well, I've always thought, I've never gotten to experience it, but the beauty of having a child is the day that child is born, your life is for that child. And that's what, yes, you always want to grow and have an amazing life as yourself, But that's the beauty of bringing a child into life, is you're going to give them life, and you're going to teach them, and you're going to help them grow, and you guys are going to grow together, so that hopefully one day they can have and experience the same thing. And I have 4 friends that in the past couple months have had kids, and they all just the pure joy and just light that shines off when they talk about like how quickly their life changed for the better, and how nothing else matters except for that kid's life. And I'm like, that's something that you can't put into words. It's bigger than all of us, you know.
So I'm gonna tell you a short story. So my kid was born in 2019, and the day he was born, he was 8 months old. So he decided to come 1 month earlier.
He's a runner.
Yeah. So I was never a religious guy. I have never believed in God. So he is born, and he, because of he's 8 months old, he can breathe on his own. And when I ask doctors what is going to happen, they say, okay, so we're gonna stick those things that will
Breathing
help.
tubes, yeah.
And we'll see. Everything is we're gonna find out in the next day, over the night. Okay, say okay, but if he doesn't breathe on his own, well, I don't even wanna say to you what is going to happen. And I kind of imagine that this life would be much difficult if he won't breathe on his own. I remember myself going into the room to my wife. I remember myself going to sleep, and I was praying all the gods, and I said, please, you can take everything from me. You can take my life. You can take absolutely everything from me. Just be sure my child, my son is healthy, and he can breathe on his own, and let him just be happy and healthy. And the next morning we come, I see him with no those supporting things, etc. And after only a few years, I realized, oh, what kind of a hypocrite I was. I didn't believe God until I needed Him. What kind of man I am?
You know what kind of man? You're a human being, and guess what? When you were talking about that, I thought about that because it's something that I've been thinking about, and I actually have been hearing other people talk about. It's amazing how we don't turn to faith until we need it. But it doesn't mean that we're not worthy of it, and it doesn't mean that we're wrong for it. You know, it was a lot easier to turn to faith when there wasn't as much distraction back in the
You
day.
think so?
I think before, when like, it's amazing for a kid to get bored in today's day and age, because they have so many things, so many shiny objects coming at you. They don't understand what it was like even for you and I back in the day when, you know, you don't have a computer in your pocket at all times, and to go see your friend, you have to go knock on the door and all this stuff. And it's so, like, even further back, where it's like you work, you eat, you sleep, and you pray. You know what I mean? Where, like, there weren't as many distractions in that sense. And so to feel like a hypocrite is natural, but at the same time, I also think that it doesn't matter what you believe in as long as you believe in something. And the fact that whether it was God or it was anything, the fact that that very next day your son was breathing and now he's a beautiful young boy, like, that's and you guys are happy and all that stuff, like, that's what matters. And that's the amazing thing about life. And uh, hearing, again, I told you I'm not extremely religious, but I do enjoy hearing people and their experience with faith, and whether they're not they are. Like, I don't go against anyone that isn't, and I can understand sometimes, and sometimes people lose faith because sometimes we have a bad luck of hand, and like, I could only imagine what a parent goes through that does lose a child. Like, that's something that, to me, I always wanted to give back to kids and stuff like that. And so something that I did when I was 25, I was like, I want to do something to help children out. And I was like, I don't have money. I don't have the means at that time. At that time, I was bartending. And something that I came up with like last minute. I was like, I'm gonna do like a charity, and I somehow within the span of a month got a 501c3 and got a bunch of different sponsors and made a birthday party that went to that. And I had a GoFundMe and ended up raising like almost $4,000 and gave it to the children's hospital. And so there's always ways that you can find some type of faith or goodness, like uh, someone that you recently had on the podcast, Sydney, a good friend of mine. He does, him and his girlfriend Jackie do amazing prosthetic makeups. And so just last week when we were camping, I came up with the idea. I was like, what if we did a makeup at the children's hospital for the kids? Let them see this amazing skill, but then also, we could do a fun one. He did Ursula on me, and we've done different Disney characters.
Yeah.
And do something like that. And then I can go around and interact with kids and get their mind off of being sick or whatever they're going through. Because, I don't know, to me, kids should never, it's unrealistic, but it's hard enough being older and going through stuff, but to be a kid and not to get to experience things is one of the worst things in the world. And I think that any way that you can help them ease their pain or take their mind off of whatever trouble is the best thing you can do in life.
So I've had a similar experience in my life. I believe that was 2016 Christmas. So me and my wife decided we have a pretty decent following in Lithuania, so we decided to make a charity as well, to collect some money and to go buy some presents, some stuff for the kids. So we went to kids. How do you say what? Foster home.
Yep.
We went to a foster home. Okay, so we went there dressed as Santa. It was nice, and then we decided let's do something else. So we started a charity as well. Then we bought from our own money a bit of presents, and we went to a hospital, to a children's hospital where kids sick they got cancer. You see, when we entered that room full of kids, they were almost all of them were bald. There was no, they were in joy maybe, but then there were their parents. The energy in that room, indescribable. You can't describe this. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It was horror, just horror. Like 4-year-olds, 7-year-olds, they're bald. They saw us as Santa Claus. They were happy. They would enjoy the presents. Everything went fine. But the look on the face that we saw
On the parents.
Oh my God! And the energy was like,
so their life is being sucked out of them because they're watching their most prized thing suffering, and they can't do anything. That to me is that's the worst thing in this world, that when you can't help something that you love more than life itself, and you can't help them. There's nothing you can do.
Nothing. Not even the money will help.
No.
Just nothing. Then you pray.
Then you resort to it.
Yeah. And that's funny that you said that back in the day when there were the bad times, it was harder to find faith in God, because I believe the vice versa. Because
no, you misunderstood me. I feel like people were more in religious and more into faith.
Oh, I got you.
Yes.
Yeah. When your life is good, so God.
No.
God?
I feel
me.
Yeah.
That's who earned money, who did business. That's me. But when the trouble knocks on your door, then God, please, come on.
Yeah.
I don't need anything. Let's touch on that supercar that you've made back in Chicago.
25,000.
Not 100.
No.
You bought a car for $800,
Yeah.
and you've invested $25,000 in it.
Yeah, well, and then 5 months into living in LA, the roads are so bad that I ended up having to sell it because I came in for acting and not for a car, and I lost 15 grand.
What was the car?
So the first car that I did when I was 15, the first car I bought was a Nissan 240 SX, and bought it when I was 15.
That's a beautiful car, right?
It's a
Still.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely have a taste for imported cars, but I'm looking forward to the day that I can afford a muscle car. But having done 2 imports, I realized don't play with toys that you can't afford to play with until you can afford to play with them. Very valuable lesson. But so when I was 15, I got that car, and then when I started driving around, I was driving down the street, and I heard a pop, blew the engine. There was a leak, and I didn't know it. So ripped out the engine, and did that one, and that one only cost me, I think, 10,000.
Only, only
So yeah,
10,000.
it was a good thing that I started working when I was 14, and I've always had jobs. And so, I mean, from building and repairing bicycles to working at a car shop, doing I mean, you name it, I've done it. But so the second one, I rented a airport hangar in Chicago, or outside in the suburbs. And over the course of a month, I had hair down to here. I wore just greasy clothes and was just constantly. I ripped out the engine, and mind you, the car that I bought for 800 had only 90,000 miles on it and drove perfectly fine. So that's where my head's at. But I always want, when I get my mind set on something, I'm like, I want it. So ripped out the engine.
Where did you learn that?
I mean, I took auto class, but I didn't really do well. It was kind of trial and error. So ripped it out. The other problem is that there was only one light in the hangar, and I was using a 36-piece Craftsman tool set, and the light at night would go on and off. So I would only have light for like 5 minutes, and then it would be off for a couple of minutes, and then so so if I was working late, man, it was hard. But so I ripped out the engine, sanded it down, ripped out everything inside. And then ordered an engine from Japan, a turbo SR20 DET engine. Ordered all new parts, new exhaust manifold, new intake manifold, new turbo. Ended up taking it to somewhere to get painted because I was like, that's the one thing. I wanted to do a triple stage pearl white paint job, and I didn't feel confident in that. But put a body kit, got new suspension, everything. But I'll never forget, I have my friends about halfway through towards the end started visiting me because they're like, you spend 12 hours a day by yourself, you're starting to lose it. So they were, they were nice enough to come and help me out with certain things and make me company. But there's a video of me putting gas into the tank, the hood's off, the bumpers aren't on, the engine's in, and the first time starting it and going down the street, and you just and the shit-eating grin that I had on my face when it started. So, so I actually ended up 8 days after my 20th birthday. My birthday's on October 20th. I arrived in LA, but a couple days after the birthday, I packed up my car. My dad came with me, and we drove cross country. And in Vegas, he ended up flying back to LA, and I drove the last, stint of the trip by myself. And yeah, it's something I'm sad I didn't get to enjoy the car as much as I would like to have because it was incredible. But having that experience is something that no one can take away from me, and it's something I look to do later on. And I learned a lot, and again, knowing that I can do anything is the most valuable thing there.
So back then, working in a garage in Anger, did you feel like Dominic Toretto?
It was warm, and I did have a tank top on sometimes, so yeah, a little bit.
Did you have the cross?
No cross, but I will say, I think like many car enthusiasts, Fast and Furious was a big influence. And at that time, I remember going to see Fast and Furious with my friends. We were on our bikes. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Bikes,
but
not motorcycles.
No, bicycles. I did have a motorcycle later, but bicycle. But kind of a cool thing where that did influence me and whatnot. Years later, shortly after Paul Walker's passing, a friend of mine, Dave Parker, him and I actually made our feature film together called It Watches. He introduced, and I've now become friends with James Wan, who directed Fast 7.
Yeah.
And so we were invited to go to set, and I got to be on set and watch them film some scenes and stuff like that, which was just kind of mind-blowing, full circle, because it was such a big influence on me when I was growing up. But I saw Paul Walker's brother standing in, and the technology that they had to come up with to make him look like his brother. But such an incredible experience. I mean, those movies are bigger than life. You know, they had 2 parking lots filled with hundreds of cars, of just hundreds of just people working on the set. It's incredible.
So okay, I'm gonna give you this. So you've got unlimited budget, and you have to choose 3 cars. Which cars would you choose?
That's such a dirty question. All right.
That's why I said 3, not 1.
So definitely, number 1 is going to be a 356 Porsche. I do love the new ones, the new 911 turbos and whatnot. And they're amazing. But ever since I was a little kid, that's just something that my mind went to. And even when I was a kid, my dad brought me from Germany this little model red 356 with a chrome rack on the back, and I don't know, it's just the perfect car.
Yeah, but back in the day, those cars were so small.
Oh, that's the problem. Is I definitely would not be able to fit in it, but I love it.
I see once in a while I see 911 like 95.
Yeah, they're tiny.
Like this.
Yeah.
How can you?
And I've driven a newer 911 and completely comfortable. I could fit in it fine, but no, that's definitely yes 3. So that's number 1. Number 2 would most likely be 1971 Challenger, and number 3 would have to be 458 Ferrari.
So you like to suffer? No casual cars, just
well,
for the regular day?
Shit, you got a good point.
Maybe 458, maybe.
No, so here's the thing is I have now my Jeep, and there has not been, I've had a lot of cars. There's never been a car that I get into, every single time I get into it, I look around, I'm just like, hell yeah.
You like it?
I've always wanted a bigger car, but I do have a passion for cars and speed and all that stuff and rebuilding them. But I've always wanted a bigger car, and so when it came down to getting that Jeep, I was like, I don't know. Drove it, and I kid you not, for the past 2 years, every single time I get in it, I'm like, this is amazing. And the things that you could do with it, it's just like, it's such a versatile car. You could take it anywhere. I mean, we go off-roading all the time. We go camping a lot. So, and it's just so well built. And here's the thing is, after driving it for 2 years, now when I go in other cars, I'm like, I don't feel safe. I actually, 2 months ago, and I've always said I don't ever want to get in an accident with like a supercar. Well, sure enough, I'm driving down Hollywood Boulevard. I'm coming home from the gym, and there's this McLaren the guy's kind of driving like an asshole. You can hear him. He's like speeding and then backfiring and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And all of a sudden he stops, but he doesn't put in turn signals, and he pops in reverse. And I go to put in reverse, and I go for my steering wheel, and I pull my thumb back all the way. Don't make it in time. He smashes into me. Mind you, this is not just any McLaren. It was, I forgot what model, but it has the exhaust coming out the back top. Easily $300,000-$400,000 car smashes into me, and I'm like, oh, fuck. First off, I'm in pain. This kid comes out. He's got Montana plates. He comes over to me immediately before I can even notice what happened. And he's like, hey man, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like sitting there, I'm like, are you all right? And he's like, yeah. He's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I just sprained my thumb. Get out. And his rear bumper is smashed, obviously. And that's easily like $20,000.
Yeah. I want to say that.
And we're looking at my car, and I'm like, shit, I don't see anything. Later, after the fact, I found there's a scratch, but barely. But I'm like, so what do you want to do? And he's like, well, I'm the one that has the damage. And I was like, you know what? He's young. I'm like, what are you going to do? And he's like, oh, this isn't even my car. It's my friend's car. I'm like, huh. But he's not fazed at all. And I'm like, all right, whatever. End up leaving. And I'm talking to Sydney at that point. And he's like, dude, that sounds fishy. He's like, what if he calls the cops and says that you smashed into him?
Yeah.
You don't have a dash cam, which now I do. I'm like, shit, you're right. So I go back, and it was right in front of one of those Hollywood tour spots that it happened. And I talked to the guy, and he's like, hey man, I saw it all. He's so nice. He gave me his information. He texted me. He's like, if anything happens, let me know. I was there. I witnessed it. Luckily, nothing happened. 2 weeks later, I'm at Runyon Canyon, and who do I see flying around the streets? Same kid, same car, driving like a jackass. So it is what it is, but thank God for having a tank. That car is indestructible.
So what is his point? What is he trying to do?
I don't know. Who knows if it's his car or if it's friends, but again, kids driving these expensive cars. And
So you've mentioned the Porsche, you've mentioned Ferrari. No Lambo?
no, for 3 cars,
Yeah.
third car would. I mean, I would love a Lamborghini. I'd love it, especially an older one. I love the Aventador. But if it's 3 cars, I would want something on the bigger end, and I think it would have to be an old school Defender. Yeah, Land Cruiser Defender.
Crazy. Ivan, the last question that I got is always the same on my podcast. So let's have 2 assumptions. So assumption number 1 is, let's assume that the President of the United States is the most powerful man in the world. And assumption number 2, you become the President of the United States. Once you become the President of the US,
Please, no.
the Secret Service comes at you and say, Mr. President, you can ask everything, and we will give you the answer. We know the truth to every questions that you have. What would be your first question that you would ask them?
It would have to be, I want to see a spaceship.
Why? Almost like
Everyone.
9 out of 10 say aliens.
Because see, all the other things, like there's definitely things that could be cover-ups that people would want to know, like who really killed JFK, all that type of stuff. That's all fine and dandy. I think, and Joe Rogan talks about it a lot, but he has a point for talking about this universe and the galaxy is so big. To me, the fact that we all have suspicions, the fact that that stuff isn't just general knowledge. Yes, is there a possibility that everyone's going to lose their mind and be scared and cause panic? Sure, but you shouldn't hide it. And I think that the idea that maybe one day, hopefully not too far away, that we become planetary species is such a cool. I mean, like, I don't know. Everyone, when they watch sci-fi movies, they're like, yeah, that would be so cool. Granted, I would never want to go to another planet that you can't be outside. I love the sun. Seasonal depression is definitely a thing, and that's part of the reason why I'm not in Chicago. But how cool would it be to know that we're not the only ones? I mean, that's fascinating to me.
Can you imagine if we're not the only ones, but we're the smartest ones? That's it? In the whole galaxy?
I highly doubt that.
And we do the shit we do every day.
No, there's no way.
Our life.
There's no way. There's got to be someone out there that's just watching us and being like, look at these people.
Crazy. So, Ivan, thank you for your time. Thank you for opening up, speaking about your grandfather. That was really, really interesting. And I believe a lot of people were going to watch this podcast and say, yeah, those are the values. Those are the principles that we should more talk about.
We have to start changing the way we do things, and people need to start realizing we got to look out for each other, and we're all human. And it's just, how are we going to move forward together? Stop dividing, start uniting.
Amen. Amen.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.